Let's jump right in. Imagine the Indian Constitution for a second, not as some dusty, dense legal textbook, but as the master architectural blueprint for a literal, nation-sized house. Think about the absolutely staggering task the architects of modern India faced back in 1950. After centuries of colonial rule, they literally had to design a structure from scratch. And not just any structure, but one capable of housing over 1 billion people today while balancing mind-boggling diversity with absolute legal unity. It's wild to think about.
So think about it. If a country is a house, how on earth do you write the ultimate set of house rules? This little thought experiment really frames our entire exploration for this explainer. The original architects had to figure out how to get hundreds of different linguistic groups, entirely distinct cultures, and varying religions to all agree to live under one single roof without the whole house collapsing on them. They had to draw the property lines, decide who gets the keys, set rules to protect the residents, and, figure out a process for future renovations.
Okay, let's quickly run through our agenda. First, defining India, union, and territory. Second, who belongs, citizenship explained. Third, shielding citizens with fundamental rights. Fourth, adapting law through constitutional amendments. And finally, the unbreakable core, the basic structure doctrine. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The Blueprint. Defining India's territory.
Right, so before you can govern a country, you have to pour the physical foundation. Article 1 plainly states, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Now, what's fascinating here is that the word union wasn't just some casual, stylistic choice by the chief architect, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. It was a very deliberate, heavy-duty lock on the front door. See, unlike a federation, where independent states voluntarily come together, shake hands, and form a country, the word union means the states never agreed to join, and they absolutely do not have the right to leave or secede. The unity of the nation is permanent. You can't just pack up your room and walk out of the house. No way.
But here is where the blueprint gets honestly brilliant. While those exterior borders are permanently locked tight, the interior is highly adaptable. Articles 2 and 3 essentially give Parliament the flexibility to literally rearrange the interior walls of the House. Over the decades, states have been split, merged, and renamed to accommodate deep linguistic and cultural identities. Parliament can admit new states or ultra boundaries through simple legislation. It's a totally dynamic blueprint, perfectly designed to bend to regional aspirations so that the rigid exterior never snaps.
Moving on to Section 2. The Residence. Citizenship explained.
Now that we've got the property lines drawn, we need to know who actually gets the keys. Deciding citizenship in 1950 wasn't just a matter of filling out bureaucratic paperwork. Coming right off the chaotic, devastating crisis of partition, it was quite literally a matter of life, death, and massive human displacement. The Constitution managed that initial crisis, but then it wisely left the permanent rules to Parliament. Enter the Citizenship Act of 1955, which laid out 5 distinct pathways, basically 5 separate doors, to gain full membership. You can get the keys by birth within the borders, by descent through your parents, by formal registration, by naturalization over a period of time, or if India incorporates an entirely new territory.
But just as there are doors to get in, there are exit doors to lose those keys. You can voluntarily renounce your citizenship or face deprivation in cases of fraud. What's absolutely crucial here, though, is the rule of termination. India enforces a very strict single citizenship rule. Why does this matter? Well, because the architects wanted undivided loyalty to the house. If you voluntarily acquire a foreign passport, boom, your Indian citizenship is automatically terminated under Article 9. You simply cannot hold 2 sets of house keys at the exact same time.
Section 3. The House Rules. Shielding Citizens.
Let's transition over to Part 3 of the Constitution. This is often called the Magna Carta of India, and it establishes the strict house rules. But before we can actually enforce these fundamental rights, we have to define exactly who we are enforcing them against, right? Article 12 casts an incredibly wide net over what actually constitutes the state. It includes the union government and parliament, sure, but also state legislatures, local municipalities, and other government-controlled authorities. And why cast the net so wide? Because if the Constitution only restricted the Prime Minister, lower-level authorities could still completely abuse your rights. This guarantees that anyone holding even a sliver of government power has to play by the strict house rules.
Imagine standing completely alone against the entire massive machinery of the government. That is a terrifyingly unequal mismatch. The state holds the police, the military, the tax authorities, the whole shebang. So fundamental rights act as this impenetrable, guaranteed shield for the ordinary citizen. They protect your civil liberties against that immense power. The state is legally restricted from making arbitrary laws. It's just a totally essential mechanism of accountability, making sure the government cannot trample on the very people it was created to serve.
And how exactly are those rights enforced?
Well, that happens through Article 13, which states that any law inconsistent with or in derogation of fundamental rights shall be void. Think of Article 13 as the ultimate uncompromising bouncer of the House. If a new piece of legislation tries to sneak in and violate your freedom of speech or your right to equality, Article 13 is the bouncer at the door that just tosses it right out into the street. It automatically makes that violating law completely void, no questions asked.
But I found this detail really fascinating. When a law crosses the line, courts actually act more like skilled surgeons than executioners. Instead of throwing an entire law into the trash, they use two specific doctrines to fix things. The doctrine of eclipse is used for old pre-constitutional laws that conflict with modern rights. It simply overshadows or pauses them, rendering them dormant but not completely dead. Meanwhile, the doctrine of severability acts exactly like a scalpel. It trims away just the unconstitutional, infected bad parts of a statute, saving the rest of the healthy, valid legal framework. Pretty smart, right?
Section 4. The Renovations. Constitutional Amendments. Okay, so a house built back in 1950 absolutely must adapt to modern times, so Article 368 gives Parliament the power to renovate. Notice how the difficulty of the renovation scales depending on exactly what's being changed. Want to apply a fresh coat of paint, like maybe changing a state's name or updating citizenship rules? Easy. That just takes a simple majority. But altering fundamental rights? That's way more serious and demands a special majority in Parliament. And then structural changes, like altering the Supreme Court or the federal balance, which is essentially moving a load-bearing wall, well, that requires a special majority, plus ratification by half of all the state legislatures.
Section 5. Unbreakable Core. Basic Structure Doctrine.
This brings us to what I think is the most dramatic climax in Indian legal history. If Parliament has the power to renovate the House, can they legally demolish it entirely? This question sparked one of the most epic political tug-of-wars ever seen. On one side, you had Parliament trying to assert ultimate power over the Constitution. On the other, the Supreme Court trying to protect the citizens. And the pendulum swung wildly. It started with the Shankari Prasad case, where the court said Parliament can amend absolutely anything. Then, a massive reversal in the Goloknath case, where the court suddenly said Parliament cannot amend fundamental rights at all. The tension was literally at a boiling point.
This standoff led to the 1973 Case of Ananda Bharati ruling, which delivered a massive plot twist and a spectacular compromise. The Supreme Court ruled that, yes, Parliament can amend any part of the Constitution, and that includes those fundamental rights. However, they drew a hard line. Parliament cannot alter or destroy the basic structure of the document. This singular ruling fundamentally changed the power dynamics of the nation forever. It effectively saved the democratic foundation of the country from any future government that might try to erase it. It was a total game changer.
So, what exactly is this basic structure? Well, it includes the supremacy of the Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers, federalism, secularism, democracy, and judicial review. These are the ultimate load-bearing walls of the nation. Parliament can change a lot of things, but these core elements can never be touched, knocked down, or legislated away. Think about it. If you strip away judicial review or take a sledgehammer to federalism and democracy, the House collapses entirely. It literally ceases to be India.
I'll leave you with this final thought. The sheer brilliance of this document lies entirely in its ability to bend to the future without ever breaking its democratic foundation. In an era where democracies around the world are showing serious cracks in their foundations, how has this blueprint survived? How does a document designed in 1950 perfectly balance the flexibility to adapt with an unbreakable core to govern over 1 billion people today? It survives by trusting the democratic process for daily renovations while relying on the judiciary to fiercely guard those load-bearing walls. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep learning.